Welcome back to our study on the book of Romans. This is Sonship Establishment Part 3. This is session 27. All right, I kind of want to pick back up. I kind of got off of my notes a little bit there the last time, but there was one thing that I gave you when we were talking about the love of God back in justification, and that is the ultimate ground of our hope rests in the unfailing, steadfast love of God. I just want to make a parallel issue. The same thing is true, that the ultimate ground of hope that we're going to succeed as sons is resting in the love of Christ. And that really is what is there. And when Paul says, I am persuaded, there's a convincement that has gone on with him. But look, this is the important part of this to understand. When Paul says, I'm persuaded that none of these things are going to be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord, he's not making an intellectual statement. And right now, that's what all of us are doing. We're just looking at an intellectual statement. What he has done is he has gone through these things. He has seen that the provision that was made for him to be able to handle the tribulations and the distresses and the persecutions and everything else, those things were unfailing. And he experienced that. He can come along at that point and say, I am persuaded that none of these things are going to have the kind of effect on my sonship life that they were designed to have. There really is a remedy for that, and the remedy works. See, it's one thing to say it academically, but it's another thing to say, I can tell you this works. I've been there. It's almost the difference between a guy saying, I know I can take your appendix out. Well, have you ever done it? Well, no, but I'm just sure I can. But when you get a guy that's been there and been through it and he's done 1,000 appendix, you know what? That's the guy you want, right? And although you can be persuaded in your mind, but do you know that when these things begin to happen, it turns you upside down? I'm going to have a hard time communicating this, but when the tribulations and the distresses and the persecutions begin to happen, there is going to be the natural tendency to get focused on the problem and forget about the remedy. And that's the whole distraction issue of the policy of evil. Because there is a remedy. And that remedy, you can't be separated from it. It is always going to be there. And there is no circumstance you can encounter in which it will not. And that is supposed to make a difference in the confidence that you have toward this. Just as Christ demonstrated his love toward us in dying on the cross to justify us unto eternal life, he is also demonstrating his love toward us as sons. You could start it right back up here by what the Father did in this, and then following what the Son did. When he died, he was resurrected, he was at the right hand of God, and he makes intercession for you. Those things are always going to be accessible. Those things, there's never going to be a situation you're going to get into where his intercession's not going to be there. It's not going to be working. That's really the point that I wanted to make about that. So, just as the love of God spread abroad in our hearts is going to handle the tribulations of the gospel that were geared to make Paul and those that were with him ashamed. Look, I know we look at that and think, how could that happen? You have to understand, you come along with a gospel of grace, that's different from everything that had been done before. How easy would it be to look at that and say, you're not preaching what we're used to hearing preached? I mean, there's no way. I mean, what's he going to do? He's going to say, well, you know what? This is what I got from the Lord. Oh, who wouldn't say that, right? So this is all geared to do that. These things are geared to make you resign from your sonship life. But just as the love of God impacted Paul to not be ashamed of the gospel, the love of Christ is going to impact you to not throw in the towel against those 7 attacks that come from the adversary. And I'll just say again, and absolutely no one will be able to separate you from those things. And what that means is, and this is the way I see where that leads you, if nothing can separate you, if I'm right, and no one can separate us from the love of Christ, and that is what His love has produced on our behalf as a son, if no one can separate us from that, then that means that remedy is always there no matter what tribulations come along, and we will be able to not only go through them, but we will endure them to the glory of our Father. That's the way that is supposed to happen. And that's the way I see that. Everything He has done for you, from His work on the cross to His intercession, and things that will be further talked about in the curriculum, are an expression of the profound love that He has for you as a joint heir with Him. Remember what this whole thing is supposed to do. It is supposed to give you confidence that this is going to succeed with you. And to me, that fits right in with that. Now, is it true that even though those provisions are there and nobody can undo them, can you ignore them? Yes. Can you walk away from them? Yes. Can you quit? Yes. You can do all of that. But you have to understand that that still didn't do away with them. That still didn't nullify them. Can you come back 5 years later and say, oh, you know what? I was so wrong. I'm going to pick this back up. Are those remedies still there? Yes, they are. And that's why the answer to the question is no one. Now, I actually see question 5 picking up on a couple of the previous questions. Question 2 was about the Son. You know, how shall God not with Him also freely give us all things? And if you remember, that was, that's what he talked about, the provision that Christ made there. In question 4, it was about the Son again. Remember His death, His resurrection, He's at the right hand of God, His intercession for us. And in question 5, I see Him picking up on that same thing. Okay, now I need to skip over here because we covered those verses. But I want to deal with these other 2 now just for a moment. If you say, well, I think this is talking about our love for Christ. Look, you're a son. You can think that if you want to. I mean, that's really going to be your decision. It's got to be your decision at the end. Listen carefully. I don't care who it is, me or anybody else. You can't believe what anybody says just because they say it. You have to look at the Scripture and know, this is what I see, and here's why I see it. It can't be about anything else. You have to approach this as a son. And so doing that, I'm giving you the leeway to say, if you know what, if you believe that, you don't even have to come and tell me. I'm not your tutor and governor. But if you say, well, I think who shall separate us from the love of Christ, I think that's talking about our love for Him. Let me tell you what I see is wrong with that. You have now done the one thing we've been emphasizing throughout this whole third part of our establishment, and that is for us to have the perspective of the Father and the perspective of the Son toward what's being done. When you talk about now it's my love for Christ, you have reversed that back now to your perspective. And I see that as what is that not ringing? I'm looking at your faces and you're looking at me like I just spoke in German or something. Do you remember we talked about this is His perspective? And when now you're talking about, oh, it's going to be my love for, that changes the whole perspective to back to you and how you see it. He doesn't want you to see it from your point of view. He wants you to see it from His point of view. And that's the thing I think He's trying to get to. Okay. The other thing, and of course the other question, and I talked a little bit about that already. If you talk about this being something that Christ loves, I've already told you, I don't have any problem with thinking that he loves the curriculum and he loves the sonship life. And we talked about that last time. But I do see that there are those who were separated from that. The policy of evil was successful. I wish it wasn't. It should not have been. But Paul didn't say it shouldn't. He said it's not able. And to me, that's a different issue. If something's not able to do something, you know what that means? It can't do it. It cannot do it. And so, again, I'm just trying to make a case for what I'm looking at there. Okay. Just to kind of give you, some of you, I'm glad I put this verse in there because when Rick mentioned this, I know I saw some looks on faces, but give me that next. Oh, the PowerPoint's out. Okay. Okay. 2 Timothy, let me just read it to you. 2 Timothy 1:15, because not only did the Corinthians stop their sonship, and thankfully they got back on track after Paul wrote the letter of 1 Corinthians, but the churches in Asia all turned against Paul. And you can see that in 2 Timothy 1:15. It says, "This thou knowest, that all they which are in Asia be turned away from me, of whom are Phygellus and Hermogenes." In 2 Timothy, in every chapter, Paul mentions two people that became oppositions to him and the ministry that he was trying to carry on. Here's the two names in 2 Timothy chapter 1. You can go through the rest of that chapter. And by the way, each one of those attacks represent a different aspect of the policy of evil. I'll just say that if you want to go through 2 Timothy and take a look at that. Now, but here's the thing I want to say. None of the attacks that will come against you, none of them are greater than the edification that is supposed to take place in our inner man. That is something that enables us to handle every one of those attacks. There is no legitimate reason for failing as a son. Is it back? Okay, there you go. Okay. The troubles in verse 35 are trying to do something for which God has given you a remedy. But that's why these questions can't be approached merely like they're academic. You can't just look at them to say, I've got an answer or I've even got an explanation. But you really have to spend some time with your Father about this to enable you to get the assurance and the confidence that these things are meant to build into you at this point right here in your sonship establishment. He has made and he will continue to make all of the provisions that are necessary for you to succeed as a son. And no matter what happens, none of those things that Satan can do to any extent, even to the taking of your life, can bring those to naught, or to use the Bible terminology, to separate you from those things. Okay. Now, one more thing we need to look at in this verse, and that is the who. Actually, you know what? I did have something. I know I've skipped over it here. Just a minute. Let me just kind of look here and make sure I'm going to cover this. Maybe I just haven't come to it yet. Okay. Verse 35. Is it up? Yeah, that's what I knew was going to be next. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? And I'm going to wait because I think it's in the notes a little later on. So give me the next time that's used, and that, well, I guess I'm forced to do it now. Wonderful. When you use the word shall, there, you know what? No, don't give me that. Just skip over that. Just skip over it. There you go. There you go. And we did that. Let me just do it like this. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Can you not see that question asking you this? Who has the ability, when it says who shall, who is able to separate us from the love of Christ? Now, That's the way I see that word shall. We've encountered this word before with a who in Romans 8:33. That's really the verse I'm after here, Trent. Can you find that? One more maybe? No, I don't know. Okay, maybe it's not in there. Romans 8:33. Here was the other shall. Who shall lay anything to the charge of God's elect? Well, what was the answer to that question? No one. No one. It's the same answer for this one. And what that means is, who has the ability? Who is capable of being able to do that? No one is able to do that. That's the point that I'm making to you about this being the description of Christ's love, because what he's produced out of that love, no one is able to undo or to separate us from. Another one that's not on the PowerPoint evidently is Revelation chapter 5. And in Revelation chapter 5, this is the way I understand this, and this is where there's the Father seated on the throne. He has a seven-sealed book in his hand. I'll take it in verse 1. And I saw on the right hand of him that sat on the throne a book written within and on the backside sealed with seven seals. And I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, who is worthy to open the book and loose the seals thereof? And no man in heaven nor in earth, neither under the earth, was able to open the book, neither to look thereon. And when it says no one is able, if you were to ask the question, who shall? The answer would be no one. And do you know why it would be no one? Because no one is able to do that. No one else was able to take that book and to be worthy of loosening those seals. And the reason I'm describing this way is because no one is able to undo those things that his love has provided for us. Just as his love provided things in our justification, his love has provided things in our sanctification. These things made us secure as a child of God, and these things make us secure as a son. And if you say anything else, then you have to be able to say that. And by the way, and we talked about this at the break. If someone does fail in this, you do realize they're still a son. That hasn't gone away. The provisions that were made for them to succeed are still there. Those haven't gone away. And so, just saying that, that shall is talking about capability. No one is capable of doing that. Okay, I think I've said all I need to say about that. Now I want to talk about the who in this question, because this who, that's not it either. Is that the last verse? Give me the next one. No, that's it. All right, well, let's just go back to verse 35. When he talks about who shall separate us from the love of Christ, I've already told you that the who is the adversary. But did you notice that in the verse, it just asks who, and it doesn't say who it is. And when you read these 7 things that start with tribulation and move all the way down to sword, when you see those, you understand, yes, these are 7 categories, and each one is an increase over the one before. But as you see those, the only way you would know that was the adversary is, look, just put them in. Tribulation, distress, persecution. I mean, you get it, right? Look. Well, is nakedness this one, or is it, or famine? Is this nakedness? And then famine. Okay. Okay. Now, when you look at those, can't all of those come upon you as part of the suffering of this present time? Sure. The general use of who in verse 35, who shall separate us from the love of Christ? It is a who question, but he didn't. But in view of what follows, you would think Maybe he should have said, what shall separate us? But when it starts with a who and changes to a what, then what we understand is there is someone using something to accomplish what they want. But you're not identified who the who is. If you say the who is the adversary, I would say you'd be absolutely right. But when the adversary does these things, what is he going to use to do it? If it's sword or peril or take away your income so you don't have proper clothing, you can't feed yourself, you're being persecuted, going through tribulation, what's he going to use to do that? I'm using a word that's misleading you, and that's why I know you're not answering the question. But if I give you the word, I've given you the answer. What is being utilized to accomplish this? Well, okay. Ron's under the attack of the adversary. And just because of his sonship, he's going to lose his job. What is Satan utilizing? Well, see, my what is what's throwing you off. Who is Satan utilizing to do that? Or he's being persecuted. Who is Satan utilizing to do that? I'm not looking for a name.
Circumstances.
Well, okay. He's using people, right? He's using people. He doesn't just walk in one day and all of a sudden he doesn't have an income because he's a son, and nobody was involved in that. Somebody is being utilized by the adversary to say, as long as you're involved in that, well, you own your own company, though. They can't fire you, can they? Okay. Ron's not a good illustration, okay? Okay. And so when you walk in, you know someone. Oh, no, I'm not getting in that one either. Okay. Okay, for the rest of us, you know someone is involved in that, right? I mean, remember, Satan is going to use someone to carry out. Remember, he doesn't show up in his red jammies with the flap in the back and horns and waving a pitchfork and going, here I am. He's using people. Some of them are being used without their knowledge. Later, some are going to be used, and guess what? They know they're the tool of the adversary, and they mean to be the tool of the adversary. But they're going to use people. Persecution, that's going to come from people. You're going to suffer these things because of people. And when you do, what have I got left here? Okay. When you suffer these things because of people, you can look at that and say, who shall separate us from the love of Christ? And you may not look at that and go, it's Satan. You may look at that and go, it's his accomplices out here that are working. And if you said that, guess what? You'd be right again. Is it Satan? Well, yeah. But is he using someone? Yeah, that's the one you'll see. Or could either one of those be right? Well, sure they could. They're all together. Where's the only place that you can go to that you would look at Romans 8:35 and say, that who is really talking about the adversary? How would we know that? Because have you in the book of Romans even been introduced to the adversary yet? Think about it. We're assuming some things that really Romans 8:35 hasn't led us to yet. But you do know something that would make you go, you know what? I think I see someone's hand in this. But where would you have gotten that?
These people that were evil.
Okay, and it talks about people. That's right. Go further back, Linda. Okay, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. Okay, we're all looking at Linda now. Okay, no, back in Acts. That's great. Well, you would have come through Acts. I got to give you that one. She's pretty clever. You need to watch yourself. Remember back in Proverbs, you had the evil man and the strange woman. Remember? So you have seen that there are, but now who's behind both of those? Who got the course of this world going? Well, that was the adversary. And who's behind the policy of evil? Satan. He's behind both of those. So we already know from looking at in Israel's sonship that there is an active opposition to that. But still, it's a general who. And here's the only point I'm making about this. Yes, it is the adversary. But we know stuff ahead. That's the problem. I'm talking to you like you don't, but you do. So pretend you don't. And if you don't, then think of it like this. You're going to see a who, and you may go back to the evil man and the strange woman. And you may say that might be the who. Or you might look at the people as described in Romans 1, or the people that you would experience these actual attacks. You know, they're the I don't know, mechanism. They're the conduit. They are, but there's a better word. They're the tool. They're the,
Minions.
They're the minions. Okay, I love that word. They are his minions, and they're doing his bidding. But you'll look at them and you'll go, okay, later on you'll get into the curriculum and you learn some things about the policy of evil that will make you look back on what you read in 35 and you go, oh, you know what? I see details now I didn't really observe when I went through that in Romans 8, because all Romans 8 is doing is not meant to give you a detailed study of the satanic plan of evil. It's just a general understanding. That's not really the subject matter. The subject matter is it doesn't matter what he throws at you, you've been given something that can handle it. That won't keep you from being successful as a son. It cannot be done. Do you see what I'm saying? But later you would look back and go, you know what? Those things are actually 7 categories of attacks, and you might see some progression in there. But let me ask you another question. When you look at this, not only do you see all of these could happen in the suffering of this present time, so I kind of see the unidentified who as saying this, because didn't we already get that back in part 1 of our establishment, the suffering of this present time? So I think now here's what's being done. Yeah, things can happen to you as the suffering of this present time. They can also happen to you as a result of a planned attack against you, but it doesn't matter which one it comes from. There is a provision that gets you through that. You see? That's all I'm really trying to get to about that. Because if I get too dogmatic about ascribing this who, and it is Satan, it is, but we would really only nail that down because of something else that we haven't been given yet. I mean, there's a couple of you, you're bright enough, you'd look at that and you'd go, oh yeah, you know what, I saw some things sitting back there and I saw that. But not everybody would do that. I probably wouldn't do that. But we do know about things up there, and sometimes that does help us. Okay, so I said that about that. Okay, now, let's see. I think I'm done with that, so now I do this. You don't have PowerPoint for this, so if you have a Bible, you might want to just open it up. Romans chapter 8 and verse 35. It's still the same verse. In fact, take us back, Trent. We're just going to be on this one verse, so you can just stay with it. Take me. Oh, there you go. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? When you see these 7 things, I only have a few minutes to get you started here, but I do want to talk about it. Shall tribulation, that is the first thing in the list. And when you look at that, this is the point I was about to make, can't you see that every one of these are some kind of tribulation? They are. Now that should make you wonder, because if tribulation is followed by distress and then that by persecution, there is a progression here, and I want you to kind of notice this. So I'm just going to say a couple of things about these just to kind of get your thinking started on it. The tribulation that he's talking about here is not being without a way to clothe yourself or being in peril or being killed or any of that. That's not the kind of, or being persecuted. He's not talking about that. These tribulations are mental. And that's where the attack always starts. there is a battle going on for your mind. And that's why your Father wants you to learn to think like He does. And it's important that you understand the very first thing that Satan will come against you in is going to be some mental tribulations. Now look how this follows. The second thing in the list is distress. Now, when we do the work on this, I don't have time to do it now, so I'm just going to kind of just lay some things out, and we'll pick it up next time. And it'll save us a few minutes. But when you talk about distress, and I'm going to show you, Charles Smith has a wonderful thing about the word distress. Danger is a physical aspect. Distress is a mental aspect. So once again, so what you start off with is some tribulations that are in your mind, and that moves to a mental distress. Now again, we haven't really looked at that word in the fullness of what it is. We'll do that next time. But it's going to move now from a mental turmoil in a couple of steps to now it's going to move into the physical realm of persecution. And again, that persecution, there's a lot of ways in which a person can be persecuted. But that's going to be separated out. And remember, all of this, when it comes to the policy of evil, all of this is for the purpose of getting you to resign your sonship. But then that's going to move to famine, which is you don't have the ability to eat right. You're maybe you've lost your income or whatever the situation that unfolds is. Right now, that's not what happens. We usually have something in the refrigerator and something in the cabinet, or we have the means to go get it or whatever. But this general persecution that takes place is going to be followed by, now we're going to take the food off your table. Now, if you think that's not tough, see, this is why it has to be more than just human bravado, because if you look at this and you go, I can handle the policy of evil, just bring it on. Just sit down with your family at a table with no food to put on it and watch your family go hungry, and that will impact you. You might be willing to starve to death. Are you willing for your kids to starve to death? I mean, think of the words that you would use for that. Kids, I know you're starving, but it's for Jesus. That's not the way you'll do that. Then, nakedness, the inability to really clothe yourself. We're going to look at some verses where the Apostle Paul talks about not just hungering and thirsting, but he uses the word naked and have no present dwelling place. I mean, everything had been stripped away from him. Now, Paul doesn't go around whining about it. So as a result, we don't really think of Paul as going through those kinds of hardships. You know, you look at him and you just think of, man, he's a giant for Christ. And he is. But he has gone through some things. The perils, we're also going to read scriptures that talk about, now perils, if you're in peril, give me another word for that. Danger. And that means his life now, there are attempts being made against his life. And he's going to talk about the different kinds of perils that he encountered and the different situations in which his life was at risk. Sword is when one of those perils succeeds. Sword means it got you. And now you're done. Now that is a progression. But there's some value in knowing, because I know that some folks are afraid, because when you think, when we get over to Romans 13, oh man, we're going to come to a place where we're going to put on the armor of light and the adversary is going to be against us, and oh man, what are we going to do then? Because you're thinking, what is he going to do? Is he going to take the food off my table? But that's down the line. The first thing it's going to be is a mental attack. And that's going to come in two different phases. Okay, so that does what I needed to get done today, to just kind of get that laid out so that when we come back, we can begin to go through the rest of verse 35, and then we want to go through the comment. Because I believe the comment that follows will further solidify what I have told you the love of Christ is. Because when you understand that, you know what? You really can be more than a conqueror. None of those things are going to rob you or separate you from the provision that has been made on your behalf to ensure your success as a son. Now, I did kind of skip a piece, and I didn't really mean to do that. I kind of just alluded to it in the first session, so let me end this one up in the minute I've got left by saying this. And it's in the notes. If you'll just read the notes, it's in the notes. But all of those questions have a certainty to them so that you understand there is no chance that that doesn't work. And for me, that was a very guiding principle for being able to determine what the love of Christ is and what it does. Okay. All right, let's have a word of prayer, and we'll be done. Father, thank you for the time we get to spend together, and thank you for folks. I know they drive long ways. They get up and go to work tomorrow. They're busy. It's dark when they leave, and I appreciate all that they do. I appreciate that they want this and that they desire to have it. I pray, Lord, for the effectual working of the questions and the comments that follow, to do the work in our inner man to produce the absolute confidence. Not, it worked for Paul, but maybe not for me, or it worked for someone else, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. But that this produces a persuasion that because of what has been done on our behalf, this is going to do exactly what our Father designed it to do. And there is nothing that anyone, including the adversary, can do that will change that. And may that, Lord, encourage us and bring us to the same persuasion that our apostle had.